Naomi Carter stood frozen, her eyes fixed on the moment a flight attendant escorted a middle-aged white businessman directly to her seat. Seat 3A, business class, by the window. "Sorry, airline policy," the attendant said in a mechanical tone, before turning to Naomi. "We'll need you to move to economy." From that moment, the sound in the terminal seemed to fade, leaving only the thud of her heartbeat in her ears. Naomi, 42 years old, Harvard Business School graduate, CEO of Carter Dynamics, was not an ordinary passenger. Few knew she owned 41% of Orion Group, the parent company of Atlantic Vista Airlines. But she stayed silent. It wasn't time yet. Golden light from the glass ceiling spilled into the VIP hall of Atlanta International Airport. Naomi, dressed in a tailored navy suit that hugged her frame, walked to the premium check-in counter. Her platinum, tier card and business class ticket rested neatly on the counter. The staff member who greeted her was a young blonde woman named Brittany Shaw, about 24. Her formulaic smile faltered when her eyes skimmed Naomi's face. "The economy counter is over there, ma'am," Brittany said, pointing toward the long line in the distance without even glancing at the ticket. Naomi offered a faint smile, one she had worn often in the face of mistaken assumptions. "I'm flying business class." The ticket and ID slid across the counter. A flicker of awkwardness crossed Brittany's face as she verified the information. No apology, just the mechanical act of printing the boarding pass and sliding it back. The thick carpet and warm lighting did nothing to dispel the chill in her gaze. Derek Mullen, the lounge gate attendant, blocked her way. "Sorry, this area is for business class passengers and platinum members," he said, speaking slowly as if to a child. Naomi presented both her card and ticket. "As you can see, I qualify for both." Derek inspected every detail as if checking a suspicious bill. "Just following procedure. We get people trying to sneak in." The implication hung heavy in the air, like a stone. Naomi stepped inside, chose a quiet corner, and opened her laptop to review her investor presentation for London. A deal valued at an estimated $2.3 billion. Yet the looks and words from moments ago lingered, like ink stains on white paper. Boarding for business class was called. Naomi approached. The gate agent glanced at her, hesitating. "Ah, yes, go ahead." Just 3 seconds, but enough for Naomi to register the unspoken message. They still doubted her. She found seat 3A and placed her laptop in the overhead bin. Veronica Hale, the lead business class attendant, passed her 3 times without offering the welcome glass of champagne given to other passengers. When Naomi pressed the call button, Veronica arrived, her tone dry. "Is there a problem?" "I'd like the business class welcome drink, as per standard service." Minutes later, instead of champagne, Naomi received a cold glass of orange juice, accompanied by a strained smile. Footsteps approached. A man in a grey suit appeared, Jason Whitmore, CFO of a rival tech company. "Sorry, I think you're in my seat. 3A is mine." Naomi handed him her ticket. "Mine clearly says 3A." Jason called over Veronica. The moment he said, "I always book this seat," Veronica turned to Naomi. "Could you move to economy? We'll refund the difference." Naomi's voice stayed even. "No. I booked this seat for a reason, and I have important business in London." Jason's expression showed impatience. "I have a meeting right after landing." Thomas Grant, the purser, arrived with an authoritative tone. Policy allows us to reassign seats when necessary. Naomi locked eyes with him. Under what clause? I've paid in full and my seat was confirmed. Crew discretion, Thomas replied vaguely. Passengers began to gather in the aisle. Naomi knew this was not a battle she would win on the ground. She pulled out her phone and began taking notes. Names, staff numbers, time, exact words. I am moving seats under formal protest, she said loudly enough for nearby passengers to hear. Jason slid into 3A with a sigh of relief. Naomi walked the length of the business cabin, each step like passing under a spotlight, and made her way to economy. Her new seat was wedged between a man monopolizing both armrests and a woman who looked at her with sympathy. The woman leaned over. What they did to you was wrong. Naomi gave a slight nod. Instead of lashing out, she opened her laptop. A new email popped up from Alison Rowe, the Orion Group board secretary. Emergency meeting upon landing. Naomi's lips curled into the faintest smile. No one in business class knew that true power had just walked back to economy. The jet engines began to hum lower, the Airbus A350 shuddering slightly as it taxied toward the runway. Naomi sat in seat 17B, the fluorescent light casting a cold sheen across her face. The smell of worn seat plastic mingled with the faint bitterness of watered, down coffee drifting from the forward cabin. Each soft ding of the seatbelt signal sounded like the slow drumbeat of a match whose outcome had already been decided. She opened her laptop, but not to work. Instead, Naomi logged into Orion Group's internal executive system, access granted to only 4 people in the entire corporation. She scrolled to the flight ops, personnel data section, and entered the names: Thomas Grant, Veronica Hale, Brittany Shaw, Derek Mullen, Jason Whitmore. In seconds, the screen filled with information: personnel files, complaint histories, customer service performance scores, even internal disciplinary notes. Thomas Grant, 12 years of experience, 3 official warnings for unprofessional conduct, and an ongoing investigation into preferential treatment of passengers based on personal relationships. Veronica Hale, 6 years of service, customer ratings down 14% over the past 18 months. Jason Whitmore, not an employee, but Naomi recognized his name from the short list of competitors bidding for a $450 million cybersecurity contract Carter Dynamics was pursuing. A thought flashed. Could this really be coincidence? The intercom crackled to life as Thomas announced, "We are approaching cruising altitude. Passengers may now use approved electronic devices in airplane mode." Naomi tapped open the secure satellite communication app and called the Thiel 01 line, the direct office of the chairman of the board of Orion. "Alison, connect me directly to the executive board. Right now. Right now. I want everyone, including legal." In less than 2 minutes, her laptop screen showed 6 windows: Alison Rowe, CFO Victor Hahn, Chief Legal Officer Evelyn Price, and 3 other board members. Naomi laid out the incident in exact detail, from the check, encounter, to being forced to surrender her seat. "They violated at least 3 clauses in our own passenger rights policy," she concluded. Clause 4.2. Commitment to honored confirmed seating. Clause 6.1. No discrimination. And Clause 8.4. On-the-spot complaint resolution. Victor frowned. You want to act while still airborne? Naomi looked straight into the camera. I want everyone in business class to know exactly what they've done and told to whom by the time we land. Evelyn Price nodded and began drafting a directive to send directly to Atlantic Vista's Director of Flight Operations. Ground Thomas Grant and Veronica Hale for the next week's flight schedule. Suspend Brittany Shaw and Derek Mullen pending investigation. Instruct the head of PR to prepare an emergency statement in case the story leaks. Naomi ended the call, closed her laptop, and smiled. Action had begun at the very top and was already flowing downward like an electric current finding its ground. In the business cabin, Jason Whitmore sipped champagne, laughing with a young male attendant. From her seat in economy, Naomi could see through a narrow gap in the curtain. Jason leaned toward Veronica, murmuring something that made them both burst into laughter. Naomi lifted her phone and snapped a few photos, not for social media, but to add to the record. Visual evidence always had value, especially when paired with data and contractual clauses. Another ding. Veronica appeared in economy, serving drinks to several passengers. When she reached row 17, her gaze lingered for half a second on Naomi's laptop, just enough to spot the Orion Group logo in the corner of the screen. But she walked away quickly, as if she'd seen nothing. Naomi recognized that look, the look of someone starting to suspect, but without enough information to be sure. She deliberately let a few characters of the board access portal show on the screen before closing it. A boy of about 6 in row 18 began to cry after his children's meal was missing. Naomi stood and spoke gently to his mother. Let me see if I can help. She walked forward to the business cabin, where several unused children's meals remained. Veronica, economy is short, 1 kid's meal. I'd like to take one back. Veronica raised an eyebrow. Policy doesn't allow transferring meals between cabins. Naomi kept her tone soft but carried weight. Section 12.6 of the In-Flight Service Manual permits it for passengers under 12 if there is surplus stock. I've read it thoroughly. Veronica hesitated, then reluctantly handed over a meal. Thank you, Naomi said, her eyes locked on Veronica's. 2 hours later, as the plane began its descent, Naomi received a message from Allison. Directive executed. Upon landing, the entire business cabin crew will be held for investigation. Whitmore is all ready on legal's watch list for conflict of interest. Naomi closed her laptop and fastened her seatbelt. The golden glow of the cabin's landing lights fell across her face, the light of someone about to step out of the shadows, bringing an earthquake to those who thought they were safe. The plane shuddered gently as it descended, the engines humming low and steady like the giant heartbeat of a steel beast. In seat 28B, Maya Carter sat upright, eyes fixed on her tablet screen. She was reviewing every line of her notes, each word a sharpened arrow aimed squarely at the leadership of the airline, where she had just spent nearly 8 hours confronting raw contempt and blatant favoritism. Photos of name tags, time stamps, verbatim quotes, all neatly compiled. She was not merely a passenger who had been insulted. Maya was a strategic shareholder with controlling power in the parent corporation of Atlantic Skyways. It was just that no one in the crew had considered that when they pushed her down to an economy seat. Thomas Reed, the purser, stood in the forward galley, his eyes darting toward the back of the cabin, as if an invisible wire were pulling tight across his chest. Earlier, Veronica Hayes had pulled him aside, whispering, "Thomas, we're in serious trouble. She's Maya Carter." The name made him freeze, not because he recognized her face, but because he remembered internal meetings where Carter Holdings had been mentioned as a force capable of reshaping the board of directors with a single phone call. A chill ran down his spine. In business class, Lucas Grant, the businessman who had taken Maya's seat, was beginning to sense the shift in atmosphere. The flight attendant suddenly spoke more cautiously, avoiding any mention of the seat swap. Overhearing someone mutter, "strategic shareholder," Lucas felt his stomach tighten. He glanced back toward economy, where Maya calmly typed, and it felt as if he were looking straight into a courtroom moments before the verdict was read. Maya looked up as Thomas approached. His voice dropped, trying to sound conciliatory. "Ms. Carter, we have arranged for you to return to your business class seat. If you would allow." Maya closed her tablet, her gaze cutting through his diplomatic facade. "I will sit exactly where you've placed me. That way, when we talk about this, no one will forget where and how it happened." Thomas swallowed hard, beads of sweat forming at his temple. "Then, is there anything else we can do for you?" "Yes. A written incident report, signed by you and Ms. Hayes, detailing the events before takeoff." The request made Thomas falter. Internal regulations didn't require this, but shareholder law was another matter, and Maya knew it well. "I will have to consider it," he stammered. Maya tilted her head, the faintest of smiles like the edge of a blade. "Consider it carefully. Some policies can change or disappear." At Celestial Group headquarters in New York, in the middle of the night, the boardroom glowed with the light of screens. Chairman George Langston, silver-haired and sharp-eyed, was listening to an urgent report from legal. "A strategic shareholder discriminated against on one of our flights, and it's Carter." Langston turned to the airline's CEO, William Cross, his voice cutting with each word. "Do you understand the consequences?" Cross tried to maintain composure, but his grip on his pen tightened until the cap popped off. "Perhaps this is just a misunderstanding." "It stops being a misunderstanding when there's documentation, photos, and a formal request for a signed incident report," another board member interjected. "I propose we suspend Mr. Cross pending investigation. The market will react harshly if it thinks we're covering this up." The knock of a gavel on polished wood echoed like a sentence being passed. The decision to suspend the CEO was approved, along with a plan for a press conference the moment the plane landed. An urgent message was sent directly to the flight, instructing the operations team at London Heathrow to be ready to meet a shareholder VIP at the aircraft door. Maya received the notification on her satellite, connected tablet, the corner of her mouth lifting slightly. She didn't need to leave her seat to shift the balance of power, only to use the right moment and the right tools. She recalled Clause 14.3 of the shareholder charter. The board may convene an extraordinary meeting if the conduct of employees causes significant harm to the reputation of the corporation or the interests of a strategic shareholder. Today, that clause came alive like a blade in her hand. The plane jolted again as it cut through a thick layer of clouds. The cabin lights shifted to a warm golden hue, signaling landing. In economy, a few passengers began to glance at Maya differently, a mix of respect and curiosity. Gabriela Ortiz, the woman seated beside her, leaned over and whispered, "I don't know who you are, but I have a feeling this isn't going to end on the plane." Maya turned to her, softly. "You'll see." The captain's voice came over the intercom, more formal than usual. Please be advised, upon landing, a VIP passenger will disembark first. We appreciate your cooperation." Lucas heard it and felt sweat bead on his forehead. He knew that VIP didn't mean him, and a cold dread ran through him, like signing a contract without reading the penalty clause. Maya looked toward a business class, her eyes locking on him for a brief second before turning away. In Lucas's mind, only one thought remained. I picked the wrong person to cross. As the wheels touched the runway, Maya closed her tablet and straightened her blazer. The moment the door opened, the white light of the airport spilled in, reflecting off a line of dark suits waiting just outside. The jet bridge connected directly to the cabin, signaling a reception, or perhaps a hearing, was about to begin. And this time, Maya Carter would not be the one asked to give up her seat. The aircraft door swung open, and the cold air from the tarmac rushed into the cabin like a fresh wave washing away the stifling atmosphere inside. Maya Carter rose slowly, deliberately turning each movement into a measured beat. The click of her suitcase wheels on the cabin floor echoed like the opening drums of a performance. In business class, Lucas Grant avoided her gaze, his head bent low as if searching for something in his bag, but his hand trembled slightly. Just outside the door, a group of 4 people in dark suits stood waiting. At the front was Martin Hale, Atlantic Skyway's European Regional Director, his expression grave. Behind him were 2 members of the legal department and an assistant holding a notepad. Martin extended his hand, but Maya responded only with a brief nod. There was no warmth here, only protocol. A small camera mounted on the assistant's shoulder was already rolling, its red light blinking. "Ms. Carter," Martin began, his voice rough, as if rehearsed during the flight. "We apologize for the incident on this flight. The leadership team has received the report, and," Maya cut in, her eyes sharp as a blade, "not an incident. This was systemic discrimination. I have preserved all evidence, including the violations of passenger rights policy, sections 4.2, 6.1, and 8.4. I expect your written account to be accurate to the word." The legal assistant hesitated at the precision of her citation. It was clear they were facing someone who not only knew her rights, but knew how to wield them like a weapon. The escort led Maya through the jet bridge. At the other end, a cluster of reporters was already waiting, cameras and microphones raised high. None of them knew the full details, only that there had been a major incident involving a high-level shareholder. Maya stopped and turned slightly toward them. Flashes erupted in rapid bursts, slicing through her face like the cuts of a film reel. "Today, I was treated like a second-class passenger on an airline owned by the very corporation I am part of. This is not just my story, but the story of anyone who has ever been judged by the color of their skin, their gender, or their appearance. And I will ensure this system changes." Her voice carried clearly, each word a marker in stone. Inside the airport's emergency meeting room, the chairs had been arranged in a circle. William Cross, the CEO who had just been suspended, sat in a modest position, his face tight. As Maya entered, everyone rose except for him. She pulled out a chair, sat directly opposite, and placed her handbag on the table. No laptop, no papers, only a phone containing everything that had happened. "I will be brief," Maya began. 3 employees, Brittany Shaw, Derek Mullen and Veronica Hayes. Violated passenger check, in and service protocols. Thomas Reed, the purser, abused the so-called seat reassignment authority to favor a familiar passenger, resulting in my being downgraded to economy without a lawful reason. All of this has been documented in photographs, audio recordings, and witness statements. She glanced at her attorney, who immediately placed a thick file on the table. The cover bore the Orion Group logo and the words in red, "Immediate action required." Maya continued, "Under Clause 14.3 of the Corporate Shareholder Agreement, any act causing significant harm to the corporation's reputation or the rights of a strategic shareholder can result in the immediate suspension or termination of those involved. I am requesting this clause be applied now." William Cross took a deep breath, trying to keep his composure. "Carter, this is an overreaction. We can handle this internally without making a spectacle." Maya leaned forward, her voice low but unwavering. "Miss Cross, reputation is not a figure you can edit in a quarterly report. When passengers lose trust, the market loses trust, and the stock price will reflect that faster than any balance sheet. I will not allow my reputation, or the company's tour, to be bargained away." Board member E. Evelyn Price interjected, "I support immediate action. If we do not, tomorrow we will face a media storm no one can contain." Martin Hale nodded and began reading the interim measures. Suspension of the entire crew involved, launch of an independent investigation with third-party oversight, public announcement of the airline's commitment to combating discrimination, and the establishment of a $10 million fund to support lawsuits of a similar nature. Maya listened and gave a single nod. "I will stand before the press to announce these steps. But remember, this is only the beginning. I want a weekly progress report and direct access to the investigative team. If anyone here thinks this is just a PR exercise, they should leave the room now." Silence settled, broken only by the scratch of pens on paper. As she left the room, Maya once again passed the hallway where the reporters still waited. This time, she stayed longer, answering each question with precision, weaving legal language together with relatable examples. When a contract is broken, you don't just reclaim the money, you reclaim the principle. Today, I am signing a contract with millions of passengers that this principle will stand. Outside, the London wind lashed cold against her face, but it could not cool the heat in her gaze. In that moment, Maya knew the fight had moved beyond the scope of a single flight. It would spread across every sky her airline touched, reaching every check, encounter, every seat, every greeting. And if anyone thought they could continue to discriminate in the shadows, from now on, the light would always be on them. The atmosphere at Atlantic Skyway's New York headquarters the next day was as dense as early morning fog before a storm. In less than 12 hours, video footage of Maya Carter walking out of the airport conference room had spread across major news networks, from CNN to the BBC, accompanied by headlines like "Strategic Shareholder Humiliated on Her Own Airline" and "Storm Clouds Gathering Over Atlantic Skyways." The airline's stock dropped 7% at the opening of the trading session. The boardroom on the 38th floor was packed. Massive LED screens replayed the special news segment. Footage of Maya quoting Clause 14.3 of the Corporate Shareholder Agreement, with the subtitle, "Immediate Action Required," looped over and over. George Langston, the chairman of the board, stood at the head of the table holding the latest report from the investigation team. "We have preliminary results," he said firmly. "The 4 employees suspended yesterday all have prior complaints related to preferential service. Thomas Reed and Veronica Hayes have violated seat reassignment protocols at least 5 times in the past 12 months. A board member asked, "Is there evidence they knew who Carter was before reassigning the seat?" The head of the investigation team replied, "There is no direct evidence." But their behavior and comments suggest bias based on appearance and false assumptions about a passenger's status. Maya sat at the far end of the table, quietly listening to every word. When George looked her way, she simply said, "We don't need proof they knew I was a shareholder. We only need to prove they treated me differently from other passengers for it to constitute a violation of Section 6.1 on anti-discrimination." The meeting shifted to the issue of Jason Whitmore. The legal department reported that Whitmore's company was currently bidding for a $450 million cybersecurity project, directly competing with Carter Dynamics. "Clear conflict of interest," Maya noted, her voice like a blade. "I want his bid disqualified immediately under the Fair Competition Clause in the tender contract." No one objected. That afternoon, Maya attended a press conference at the Four Seasons Hotel. Dozens of microphones were stacked on the podium, flashes from cameras strobing across the room. She appeared in a white suit, hair neatly tied back, her expression resolute. "I'm not here to tell just a personal story," Maya began, her voice carrying. "I'm here to say that every passenger, whether a shareholder or an ordinary traveler, deserves to be treated with equal respect. Atlantic Skyways will change. Starting today, we will implement 4 measures. 1. Mandatory training for all employees on non-discriminatory service. 2. The creation of an independent complaint handling unit that reports directly to the board of directors. 3. Public disclosure of violations and disciplinary actions. 4. The establishment of a $10 million fairness fund to support lawsuits related to discrimination in aviation." Her voice slowed and deepened on the final sentence. "I want every employee to understand that fair service is not just policy. It is an ethical responsibility and a condition for this company's survival." In the hall, applause spread like a fast-moving wave. Some reporters stood as they scribbled notes. The next day, passengers began sharing their own stories on social media using the hashtag #FlyFair. One person posted, "I was once denied an upgrade despite having enough points, while someone else was given priority just because they knew the flight attendant." Boom. Stories like this flooded Twitter, Facebook, and LinkedIn. The Atlantic Skyways brand was pulled into the center of the storm. But this time, Maya harnessed the wave as momentum. Under her direction, the PR department responded quickly, confirming that each reported incident would be investigated and progress publicly posted on the airline's website. Internally, Martin Hale convened all regional managers to roll out the new directives. From now on, any seat reassignment must include a stated reason and be entered into the CRM system within 10 minutes. Any instance of preferential treatment without a valid reason will result in immediate suspension. The abrupt shift left some employees unsettled, but it also began inspiring those who had once stayed silent. A young flight attendant emailed Maya, "Thank you for doing this. We've seen too many unfair cases, but no one dared to speak up." Maya read that email near midnight in her temporary London office. Outside, rain tapped steadily against the glass. She leaned back in her chair, eyes tired but sharp. She knew this fight was far from over. It had only just begun. The goal was not just to fix Atlantic skyways, but to set a precedent so other airlines would think twice before repeating such actions. Somewhere out there, those who once believed they could hide behind vague policies were now rethinking every move they made. The day ended with a call from George Langston. "Maya, the board has approved appointing you as Global Strategic Advisor for Atlantic Skyways, with the authority to intervene directly in all customer service policies." She simply replied, "I accept. But remember, I'm not here to be a figurehead. I'm here to work and to change things." George's voice grew lower. "I believe you will. And this time, no one will ever put you in economy again." 2 weeks after the press conference, Maya Carter's temporary office at Atlantic Skyways' London headquarters had transformed into a true command center. On the wall behind her desk, a massive LED screen displayed real-time data, customer complaint rates, post, flight satisfaction scores, and the daily Net Promoter Score. Figures that once appeared only in quarterly reports were now updated by the minute, like the control panel of an aircraft with Maya in the pilot's seat. That morning, Martin Hale walked in, carrying a thick file. "We've reviewed all service reports from the past 3 months," he said, placing the file on her desk. "Results: 12% of seat changes had no valid reason, and 7% of those involved favoritism based on relationships or appearance." Maya flipped through the pages, her eyes pausing on staff notes. Passenger X is a branch manager's friend. Passenger Y is a frequent guest of the lead flight attendant. "This is exactly the culture we need to eliminate," Maya said firmly. "We're going to implement the 3-point verification process. Any seat change must be approved by 3 people: the lead flight attendant, a customer service representative, and ground supervision. And each change must have an electronic signature in the system." Martin nodded, knowing this would be a major push and a test of compliance. Meanwhile, the PR department was busy handling the second wave of media attention. News outlets began publishing the stories of other passengers who had experienced unfair treatment on Atlantic Skyways. Instead of avoiding the topic, Maya directed a proactive response. Invite those very passengers to join a customer advisory group, compensating them for their time and input. "If you want change, you have to let those who were harmed have a seat at the decision-making table," she said in an internal meeting. One afternoon, Maya accepted an invitation to speak on BBC World News. The host began bluntly, "Ms. Carter, many say your incident was just an isolated case blown out of proportion. How do you respond?" Maya leaned toward the microphone, her gaze steady. "An isolated incident can be an accident, but when it happens often enough to become the common denominator, it's a system. And when the system is wrong, my responsibility, as a shareholder and as a citizen, is to fix it." The answer was shared tens of thousands of times within an hour, accompanied by the hashtag #system not accident. At the same time, tangible changes began appearing on flights. Flight attendants were issued new tablets with a service, monitoring app recording every interaction, including reasons for denying or altering a passenger request. Some staff initially reacted negatively, but gradually, as they saw instances of discrimination dealt with seriously, they began to understand this was not just extra work, but a way to protect them from unfounded accusations. Late one night, Maya stayed in the office to review the draft Customer Bill of Rights, a 14th-page document. She read each sentence carefully, refining the language to be both legally precise and easily understood by the average person. Clause number 1 read, "All customers, regardless of origin, appearance, gender, language, or social status, are entitled to equal service." She paused for a few seconds, thinking of that flight, then added a footnote. "This is not a privilege. It is the standard." The next morning, the document was sent across the entire network. At offices, check. In counters, lounges, and even on safety cards placed in seat pockets, the Customer Bill of Rights was printed clearly, along with a QR code for passengers to report violations instantly. A new hotline number was also published, connecting directly to the independent investigation team. 3 weeks later, complaints dropped by 18%. Satisfaction scores rose by 11 points. Aviation forums began noting positive feedback. Today's flight was excellent. Attendants were attentive, no sense of being judged by appearance. An article in Aviation Today dubbed it the Maya Carter model, combining procedural reform with cultural change. But Maya didn't rest. In a virtual board meeting, she stated plainly, "We've only addressed the tip of the iceberg. The next step is to integrate service quality data into management KPIs. If managers know their career progression is tied directly to customer experience, they'll ensure staff do the right thing." Board Chairman George Langston smiled. "I see why you succeed. You don't just put out fires. You replace the entire fire alarm system." By the end of the month, Maya was invited to speak at the International Conference on Aviation Fairness in Geneva. In her speech, she recounted her story, but instead of focusing on being downgraded, she spoke more about the ripple effect, from internal changes at Atlantic Skyways to influencing other carriers, as some competitors began adopting their own Customer Bill of Rights. "Real power," she concluded, "doesn't come from owning shares, but from using those shares to set a new standard, one no one dares to reverse." Returning to London, Maya stood at her office window, looking down at the bustling streets. Spring rain fell lightly, reflecting golden light on the sidewalks. Her phone buzzed, a message from a young flight attendant she had met on that fateful flight. "Ms. Carter, today I helped an elderly passenger switch seats to sit next to his wife, and no one argued. I thought you'd want to know." Maya smiled softly. Big changes often start from moments like this, and she knew the journey was far from over, but the aircraft named Atlantic Skyways had changed course and was now flying true. 6 months after the incident, Atlantic Skyways' New York headquarters had taken on an entirely different look. The first floor lobby, once adorned only with airplane photos and route maps, had been replaced with daily updated fairness index boards, complaint rates, response times, and customer satisfaction scores. Anyone walking in, from security guards to board members, who saw those numbers first. Maya Carter returned to New York to attend the Reform Progress Review meeting. Stepping into the 40th floor conference room, she found George Langston, Martin Hale, Evelyn Price, and all department heads already seated. On the large screen, charts compared pre- and post reform results. Incidents of discrimination, related complaints had dropped 42%. The Net Promoter Score had risen by 19 points, and last quarter's revenue had hit the highest in the company's history. George stood, pointing to the chart. These numbers prove that change is more than a slogan. We are seeing real business benefits when fairness becomes the standard. Maya showed no sign of self-congratulation. She knew numbers were only part of the story. The rest was about people. I want to hear from those who work directly with customers, she said. Martin signaled to an assistant, and the screen played a video of employees from different departments: flight attendants, ticket counter agents, maintenance crews. A young flight attendant said, "Now I feel protected when I do the right thing. There's no longer pressure to give special treatment to a manager's friend or an unofficial VIP." A ticket agent shared, "We've been trained to treat every passenger the same. It's a relief to know every decision is transparent and recorded." When the video ended, Maya shifted the discussion to phase 2 of the plan. "We've changed policies and procedures. Now it's time to change the way the entire airline industry views this issue." She presented the Open Skies Fairness Alliance, a voluntary coalition of airlines to share data, service standards, and violation handling mechanisms. If only one airline changes, it can be dismissed as an exception. But if several do it together, it becomes the norm. Evelyn Price voiced concern. "Competition in this industry is fierce. Do you think they'll willingly share sensitive data?" Maya smiled. "We're not sharing trade secrets, only service fairness data and customer survey results. And we'll make it public. Transparency will become the new competitive advantage." The board approved the initiative, and within 2 months, 3 other airlines, 1 in Europe and 2 in Asia, had agreed to join. Newspapers called it the Fair Skies Movement, and Aviation Today described Maya Carter as the architect of a new standard in international airline service. At the same time, top business schools began inviting Maya to lecture on crisis management and change leadership. Speaking at Harvard, she told her story, but emphasized the lesson. Real power isn't in sitting in the first seat on a plane, it's in ensuring every seat is treated the same. Students rose to their feet in applause, and many approached her for mentorship on social equity, driven startup projects. At Atlantic Skyways, positive results continued to multiply. The employee engagement score rose 25%, voluntary turnover nearly halved, and internal surveys showed staff felt empowered to speak up against injustice, knowing the system would protect them. One late evening, Maya received an email from an elderly passenger. He recounted that on a recent flight, after being told his pre-ordered meal was unavailable, a flight attendant found an alternative within minutes and offered a sincere apology. "I don't know if this is because of what you've done, but I wanted to thank you," he wrote. Maya read the message and smiled softly. Small stories like that were the true markers of a cultural shift. At year's end, Atlantic Skyways hosted the Sky Fair Gala in London to honor individuals and teams who had championed service fairness. Maya took the stage to present the Equity Champion Award to a group of flight attendants who had intervened to protect the rights of a disabled passenger against an unreasonable request from another customer. "They didn't do it because I was here," Maya told the room. "They did it because now, it's simply the natural thing to do." As she stepped down from the stage, Maya paused at the exit, looking around the room full of laughter and conversation. 6 months ago, many of these people had been part of the problem. Today, they were part of the solution. She knew there was still much work ahead, But for the first time since that fateful flight, Maya felt she had set the aircraft on the right course, and more importantly, that it would keep flying straight even when she was no longer in the cockpit. 2 years after that fateful flight, Atlantic Skyways had transformed so completely that even veteran employees could barely recognize it. From the check-in counters to the lounges to the economy cabin, passengers were now greeted with consistent respect. No more scrutinizing glances, no more half-hearted tones. The Customer Bill of Rights had become a mandatory part of training, printed directly on tickets and even on the back of boarding passes. In the grand hall of the London headquarters, hundreds of guests from airlines, human rights organizations, and the media gathered for the 2 years of Fairness in the Skies anniversary event. Maya Carter stepped onto the stage, no longer the woman who had once been forced down to an economy seat, but now one of the most influential voices for global service equity. The spotlight fell, and the room fell silent. Today, Maya began, we are not just celebrating numbers, record revenue, the highest satisfaction ratings. We are celebrating how we have redefined what normal means. Normal now means every passenger, no matter who they are, receives equal service. Normal means employees are empowered to do the right thing without fear of consequences. Behind her, the screen displayed the figures. Discrimination, related complaints down 71% since the reforms began. 92% of passengers rating the service as excellent or very good, and lawsuits involving the airline at their lowest in 15 years. After her speech, Maya invited on stage passengers who had once been victims of similar incidents. They told their stories and, more importantly, described how Atlantic Skyways had handled things differently since then. A disabled woman spoke of her recent flight. The flight attendant asked what I needed before I even had to ask. For the first time, I didn't feel like a burden. The applause that followed was long and sustained. The change did not stop at Atlantic Skyways. The Open Skies Fairness Alliance that Maya had founded had spread to over 20 global airlines. Service equity standards were being shared and adopted collectively. Several major airports, from Singapore Changi to Frankfurt, had signed agreements to incorporate the Customer Bill of Rights into their internal regulations. In the United States, Congress had passed the Carter Act, a federal law requiring all airlines operating on U.S. soil to comply with minimum standards for service equity and transparency in handling complaints. Many experts called it a rare precedent, where a single personal event led to reform at the level of national legislation. In her New York office, Maya kept only one black and white photograph on the wall, the economy cabin from the day she was forced to change seats. Seat 17B, a pale glass of orange juice, and the scene of passengers absently staring out the window. It was a reminder that every change begins with a small injustice, if someone is willing to turn it into action. One late afternoon, as she was about to leave the office, Maya received a video call from a young flight attendant in Johannesburg. "Ms. Carter," he said, his voice full of emotion. "Today I refused a passenger's request to switch seats without a valid reason. I did it because I knew the system was on my side. Thank you." Maya smiled and replied, "Don't thank me. Thank yourself for choosing to do the right thing." Maya's life had changed as well. She had become a sought-after speaker at global conferences and an advisor to numerous corporations on equity strategy and customer experience. But whenever she was asked what made her most proud, her answer was always the same. Not the title, not the shares, but the fact that millions of strangers all over the world are now treated more fairly every single day. At the close of the anniversary event, Maya stood on the balcony of her hotel, looking out at the Heathrow runway. The golden sunset bathed dozens of planes waiting for takeoff. She knew there would be new battles ahead, in aviation and beyond, but she also knew she had left a mark, a standard no one could make excuses to reverse. And somewhere, a passenger would board a plane, hand over their ticket to an employee, and not be judged by their skin color, voice, or appearance. That person would never know the name Maya Carter, but they would be benefiting from her story. That was the true victory. Maya Carter's story shows that fairness is not just a matter of ethics, it is a sustainable strategy. True change begins when one person dares to say no to injustice and refuses to back down. If you believe everyone deserves to be treated equally, hit like, subscribe, and comment "Fly Fair" to help spread this message.